Hi everyone. I've been a little under the weather, so that's why I sound a little different. But I just wanted to continue studying where we left off from Matthew, and I wanted to study on the first woman that is mentioned in Jesus' genealogy in Matthew 1, which is Tamar. Or is it pronounced Tamar? Because I get it confused because I read the Bible in Spanish, and so when I read it in English, sometimes I confuse names. So Tamar, right? In Spanish you would say Tamar, right? Or is her name different? I don't know. Sorry guys. Alright. I went into today hoping to find this really remarkable story of an amazing woman, and that is the reason why she is mentioned in Jesus' genealogy. And just the more I went into her story, it was like, man, there's so much stuff that is wrong in this story. And ultimately I think that's the point of why she's in the genealogy of Jesus. It just goes to show us how great is God's mercy and forgiveness, and how redemptive, how from things and people that are so imperfect and that make terrible choices, God can still use people to bring about his awesome plan, which was through them to bring Jesus Christ later down the line. So I think this is going to be a very short video because, yeah. You can't talk about Tamar without talking about Judah. And Judah was one of the 12 brothers. So first was Abraham, then was Isaac, and then from Isaac came Esau and Jacob. And Jacob ended up being the one that won the firstborn rights. And from Jacob, whose name was later changed to Israel, came 12 sons. And one of those 12 sons is the famous Joseph, the dreamer. But another one of those very well-known brothers is Judah. And Jesus Christ will actually be traced back to Judah. And Judah didn't have this remarkable story like a clean story like Joseph did. In fact, it's quite a I guess it would be a redemptive story. He started off pretty bad. Him, along with his other brothers, hated Joseph. They were so jealous because their father loved Joseph the best. And because Jacob loved Joseph's wife the most. That's another story for another time. But Judah was actually the one that told his brothers that they should sell Joseph for profit. And they did this. After they did this, in Genesis 38:1, it says that Judah went down from his brothers. So there's a lot of details in the story, but I'm just going to say that he found a woman that became his wife there. Apparently she was a Canaanite woman, and it was something that they weren't really supposed to do. They were supposed to be marrying women that were also believers. We don't know her name. All we know is that she was a daughter of Shua. So Judah and his wife had 3 sons: Onan, and Shelah, or Shelah, not sure how you say it. Judah took a wife for Tamar. And I'm not really sure too much about where Tamar was from. Possibly she was a Canaanite as well. So was wicked in the eyes of the Lord. That's the only description we are given. And it says that the Lord put him to death. So when that happened, Tamar became a widow. And Judah actually told his next son, which was Onan, to perform the duty of a brother-in-law to Tamar and to raise up offspring for his brother. This is part of the reason why I feel it's a little difficult to relate to Tamar, because her circumstances, her time and history, her culture, so different from ours. Being a woman here today is completely different from being a woman back in those days. Our circumstances are completely different. Our opportunities, our rights, very different. So there was this law that that apparently was in place even before Moses' times. And we hear about this law more specifically later on in Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10. But we can see it even before Moses' times in the story of Tamar and Judah. And I'll read what the law in Deuteronomy says. And like always, whatever law God establishes, it's because it's looking out for the best for people. This is going to be a loud video. Sorry. Okay, so these are the laws concerning levirate marriage. If brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in to her and take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. And if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, My husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him, and if he persists, saying, I do not wish to take her, then his brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, and pull his sandal off his foot, and spit in his face. And she shall answer and say, So shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house, and the name of his house shall be called in Israel, the house of him who has his sandal pulled off. If a brother died and he left his wife as a widow, maybe she didn't have any children, maybe she only had girls, she had no son. This law said that the brother had to take his brother's widow as his wife, and that the first son that they would have, that son would have the deceased brother's name, so that, you know, his name would live on in Israel. So that's what Judah was referring to when he was telling his second son to go to his brother's widow and to give her a son. And this law was meant to be in the widow's best interest. Because women in those times, they couldn't take care of themselves. You know, they depended on a man, and if a widow didn't have her husband, then she would depend on her son. So Onan wasn't that much better than the first brother, but it actually gives us details as to why God saw him as wicked. And the details are in Genesis 38, 9 through 10. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, so whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. There she was, again, a widow for the second time. So when Judah saw that 2 of his sons died, he was scared to give his third son to her. So he just said, "Go to your father's house and remain a widow until my third son is old enough, and I'll give him to you in marriage." So time went by, and actually Judah's wife died. And after the time of like him being comforted passed, Judah went to Timnah to his sheep shears. So pretty much she disguised herself, she covered her face so that she would not be recognizable by Judah. And Judah, he thought that this woman was a prostitute. So Judah approached her, not knowing it's her, and they made this transaction where she said, you know, "What will you give me for doing this?" And he said, "I'll give you this later on." But she's like, "Well, for the meantime, what can I have until you can give me that?" And so he left her a few things that would be like the equivalent of like an ID back in those times, that it's like so recognizable that those are his things. So she kept those things, they did the deed, and she became pregnant. So after they did that, Judah decided to come through with what he promised, but he couldn't find it. He sent someone with the things that he said he was going to give to her. The servant couldn't find her, and asked around, "Where's the prostitute that was at the gate?" And everyone said there was no prostitute at this place. So I guess he just thought, "Oh, we better just like let her keep the things, otherwise like they're gonna laugh at us." So 3 months into her pregnancy, word gets to Judah that your son's widow has done something immoral, and worse, she's pregnant. And he right away like just says, "Bring her over here, she needs to be burned." Okay, so Tamar, in her wisdom, she as she's going, she sends word to her father-in-law, and she sent the things that he had given her, and she sent a message saying, the man that impregnated me, these are the things that belong to him. So when he saw the things, he recognized, these are my things. I'm the one that impregnated her, thinking that she's a prostitute, but actually And this is what he says. He said, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son." And it says, and he did not know her again. That means that he and her never had intimacy again. So she was actually pregnant with twins. And the story continues that while she was giving birth, one of the sons stuck out his hand, but the other boy, like, it's kind of told in a way that it like makes the other boy like that much more like persistent, or like he tried harder to be the firstborn. So even though one of them stuck out his hand, the other one was the one that managed to be the firstborn, which was a big deal with like all of the rights that come with being a firstborn son in that time, in that culture. And actually the firstborn, his name is Paris, he was actually the one that continued the line. Jesus' genealogy continued through him, and eventually Jesus was born later down that line. What I gather from this story is that Tamar, she was very valuable to the story of, well, of course, Jesus, right? But more specifically to the story of like Judah. You could see how Judah was just making bad choice after bad choice, like, and you can even see how there was like his sons were like wicked. It seemed like there was a lot of like fear of God or morality lacking in that household. And once Tamar went about, I guess it seems that she was trying to fulfill this law. Like, she knew that she was bound by this law. She was told that she had to wait as a widow, and so she wasn't to marry anybody else. So she didn't have an opportunity to have give birth to a son. She was just waiting. And by the way, before she actually went and concealed herself and did all of that, she knew that the third son was of age, and that he wasn't giving him to her. So I guess she became like just desperate, and to me, it seems that she wanted to respect this law. She wanted to see, I think she thought that was her only option at that point, that in order for her to have a son that is close to like in the family of her first husband, it would be their father. So to me, I just kind of think like that's immoral, because she wasn't Judah's wife. He had just lost his wife. So there was this law. Judah wasn't fulfilling his duty. He had one more son that he could have given to her, and he didn't. And so that's why he wasn't being righteous by withholding his son that was rightfully supposed to be given to her, so that she can be taken care of. She can have this son that she needed in that culture. So although it doesn't seem that she became his wife, even though she was the mother of his children, he didn't have that relationship with her, even though he did impregnate her. So it seems that, I wonder if that's why she is mentioned separately, because in all the other, at least in the starting the genealogy off, the head of the households are mentioned, and Sarah's not mentioned. She's a righteous woman, but she was the wife of Abraham. So I'm not sure, this is just my speculation, but to me it seems that Tamar is mentioned separately from Judah because she technically was not his wife, so technically he didn't represent her. She wasn't a part of his household, by law, by marriage. So it seems to me that it's intentional, and it helps us to remember of how God can transform something wrong into something good. I guess something that I can learn from her is that she was a wise woman. She may have been wrong in the way she went about doing things, but I can't really judge her situation because, like I said, it's completely different. A woman here where I live, she can just remarry whoever she wants. But it seemed like this woman, she was stuck. Like she was waiting for this third son, and it seems pretty clear that like he wasn't going to give that to her. She was very wise in asking for those things so that she could like present it to him when she knew what was going to happen. Another thing is that she showed Judah his own wrongdoing in an interesting way. When he saw, he judged how wrong her sexual immorality was. But when he saw that he was the one that did it with her, he was able to see his own sin, that he was just as sinful as she was, but in his case, he was just lying, he was just going to be with a prostitute just for whatever reason he had, but she actually had this reason to do that, which was to try to have this son that he was pretty much withholding from her. And it's very interesting how God provided like 2 sons for her. I don't know if it was like God's way for making, making amends in some way for the 2 wicked men that entered her life. I'm not sure, but that's very interesting. That's another thing that I can learn from her. This was a woman that she was used by 3 men, from what I can tell. I can only assume the first was doing probably the same as the second because it's described the same, or if not, he was a wicked man, so her marriage must not have been good either. So it's like her life was full of men that just kind of used her or like didn't really care about her. I could see how God did something good with her life, even though she went through a lot of difficult situations, and even though she did things in a crooked way, God still had mercy over her, and he still included her in his genealogy. And then also, I can learn something from Judah's life. If you read the story of Judah and his brother Joseph's story, you can really see a transformation in Judah after all of this stuff happened in Judah's life. If you think about it, he lost 2 sons, a wife. So he must have gone through like so much grief himself. I'm sure like this helped him to sympathize or understand how hurt his own father was at the lie that the brother said that his son Joseph died, that a wild animal like devoured him. So although his father didn't really lose his son, and he was later on like rejoined with Joseph, Judah actually did lose 2 sons. And so I think this must have been a very humbling and like an experience that broke him. And I feel like this experience with Tamar just really showed him like how unrighteous he was living. And we can see that when Joseph is testing his brothers, and now Judah isn't like careless about another brother, which they could have easily have been just as jealous of Benjamin, because Benjamin was Joseph's brother, and it seems that his father is still favoring like this other son now and these brothers. But even like more loudly, Judah is the one that is speaking up, and like he's trying to protect Benjamin. And he sounds like he did repent, and he was remorseful over what he did to his father, what and even what he did to Joseph, perhaps. To me, it's very interesting when you hear similar themes from father and then a sons that followed, like Judah and his own brother. Like Judah, like he didn't care. He was so self-centered. Like he could have even like they were even talking about killing Joseph, and then they decided to sell him because it's better, that way they can get money out of it. And then you see the brothers, the first brother was wicked, the second brother, like he didn't even care about his brother that had died. He didn't care to like honor his memory, his name. He had no respect for his widow. He was just thinking about himself. And just a thought, to me, it seems very interesting how if God was going to choose Judah to be, in Jesus' genealogy, then the next male that was going to be the chosen one for the genealogy of Jesus, it was a pretty important role. And it seems very interesting that God actually put both of those sons to death, because wouldn't it have followed that Judah's first son was going to be the next person in Jesus' genealogy, but he didn't, or Onan. And then I don't even know what happened to the third son, if he ever had a son or not. Like he's not mentioned. Instead of his third son, the next son that is mentioned is actually Paris, which is the son of Tamar. So very interesting how like God chose Tamar's son. And ultimately, Judah's line would produce King David. And ultimately, and most importantly, Jesus. And don't you think it would make more sense to us that God would want to choose Joseph's line? Because Joseph, he didn't have like these immoral stories. He actually resisted, and he was even imprisoned because he did not want to sleep with his owner's wife. And he was imprisoned for a long time, and he ended up eventually being married, and he had his own sons. But it's very interesting how God chooses Judah to continue down the line. And I really do think that it's because God wants to communicate to us that this story of like redemption, this story of grace, mercy, that God is merciful and God can change a person like Judah, God could forgive a person like Tamar and bless her with a child. And of all the women in in that time, God chose Tamar, this woman with questionable character. He chose her. So it just communicates God's forgiveness, God's grace. And ultimately it speaks about how God forgives us. He's all about love, all about forgiveness, grace, mercy. That is the story of Jesus coming to die on the cross for people that are so wicked like us, and giving us this undeserved forgiveness. And we could just see how good he is in all the mess, in all of the mess of Tamar and Judah, and in all of the mess of our own personal lives. I always say it's going to be a short video, but then it's a long video. Alright guys, see you next time when we'll be reading up on the next woman mentioned in Jesus' genealogy.